What's up, dudes and dudes, the internet? My name's Scyushi, and we are back in some more Trove, and this is an idea that a friend of mine, Spooky, in our Discord, ended up letting me know would probably be a good idea for a video. Namely, a tips and tricks for new players in Trove of 2024. I know we're going into 2025 pretty soon, but there's a lot of things that the game doesn't do a good job telling you about. Like even right now, if I do /tutorial and I go to the new tutorial, which you guys probably haven't seen on consoles, it teaches you the very basics of mining ore, going to the hub and stuff like that, right? But for the most part, there's a lot of things that the game doesn't teach you that are really important to the overarching game. So there's a couple of things that I wanted to go through in today's video with you guys in no particular order. And of course, if there's anything that I end up missing, you can just sound off in the comments and correct me. So first, let's go over some text commands. Namely, you can whisper players by typing /whisper and then the player's name. But then if you're trying to reply to someone who whispered you can just type /r and then space and then start typing out your message. There's also the command /friend and then the player's name. There's /join_me and then the player's name, and that's going to invite that other player to you. I'll put a link in the description to the Trove wiki because there's a whole bunch of other commands that are equally as important, but I don't want to end up spending the entire video focusing on them because there's like ways to invite people to club worlds and whatever else, and join specific chats as well. It can be really effective for farming if you end up joining like the Leviathan chat or the Delve chat, for example. However, as a new player, you'll know right away that one of the worst chats in the game is global chat, which there is an option to just leave global chat. And I did that years ago and I don't regret it. So another thing that the game will teach you is your build inventory and placing down a delve, but it doesn't necessarily tell you that the way you actually activate the delve is you'll interact with it once to get ready. And in some cases, you can end up choosing the floor difficulty as well. But then you have to interact with it again, so long as you're the host, and then you'll force the delve to enter. Otherwise, the delve, I think, only goes up to like 8 people, if I'm not mistaken. Another big thing you'll see me and a lot of our end gamers do is bombs become your best friend in the late game because they allow you to blast your way into the dungeons so that you can be efficient and just rush the boss. Something else to keep in mind with bombs is there are certain blocks that will be indestructible. You'll notice certain areas like the Sky World, for some reason, don't have indestructible basements. But a lot of the newer dungeons that have been added to the game will actually have indestructible blocks on the bottom of them. Oh, and if any new players are watching this that are on console, these X marks the spot and mini-map and stuff, those are all mods on PC, sorry to say. Another thing that's really important that I've had dedicated videos talking about is normally most people just mash E to pick all the items up, but if you hold the pickup button, it'll actually pull all items into your inventory. And there's even an option in the miscellaneous tab to choose the minimum rarity that you want to actually loot. So you can set it to be like only crystal gear that you hold the button and it picks it all up, and everything else will be left behind. Another thing that I think the game teaches you, but it's been a long time since I went through the tutorial, is the personal chest is basically your own personal stash. Nobody else can see this, and every single personal chest that you place down is going to be interconnected, so you can always use that as a little bank. There's also the loot collector, which its purpose is to loot collect gear that you find, basically destroying it, but you'll get a bunch of resources out of it, and it'll also give you a warning if it's a new style that you're unlocking. And the reason that you would end up getting various styles is because you can swap them on the fly, basically a transmog system of sorts, and you get mastery out of it. Pretty much I would say if the gear you're looking at has more damage, that's going to be kind of the most important thing. Trove's gameplay is all about having as much damage as possible on pretty much every class in the game. There's only a few exceptions where some classes are a bit more tanky than others, but even then you wouldn't ever prioritize max health in most cases. So just keep that in mind as you're progressing through the game. The main thing that I would say offsets how hard enemies can hit you is to get your hands on Defying, which is one of the potions that you end up getting out of the shop for a bunch of qubits, which is your daily login tokens. You basically just log in, complete your daily star bar, and then you get a bunch of qubits. There's so many things that take qubits, it's actually embarrassing. But Defying is basically the only flask in the game where if an enemy deals critical damage to you, it'll automatically consume a flask to keep you from dying. The Trove Mastery, there's actually going to be two different types of mastery. There's Trove Mastery and Geode Mastery. Geode Mastery is not something that a new player needs to worry about until later on. Essentially, this area right here, the Geode Sanctuary, this is a whole other shebang of progression. Like there's eggs and creatures, and there's caves that you can go into where you have to upgrade like your jet boots because you don't actually have your double jump in there or anything. It's something all to itself. I've got Geode guides. We're not going to spend too much time there today, but I'm just saying this area is where you get the Geode Mastery, which will give you various buffs to your light stat, and the light stat is basically an armor penetration that's mostly utilized in the late game. You don't need it early on. The higher the light value, the more damage you'll end up doing to the end game enemies on top of your raw actual damage stats. But then we also have the Trove Mastery, and both of these combine into the Total Mastery, which will give you different name colors. Geode Mastery will give you a blue name. Trove Mastery will give you a yellow name. Having your Total Mastery high enough will give you an orange name. And the mastery itself, as you can see, will give you various rewards at each different mastery level. All of these will also incidentally give you a little slight stat boost and a little bit of power rank as well. But it can be really, really useful for new players to actually chase mastery, which is something that kind of becomes a bit of the end game. There's a lot of people that we call mastery farmers, where they try to get every single style, every single mount, every single dragon, every single ally. Basically, all of the items in the game pool into the mastery. Another thing to talk about is leveling up your character and how you can do it fast and effectively. So there's a couple tricks to it. The first trick that I would say is these daily quests that you get from the various biomes in the game will actually give you a pretty significant amount of XP every time you end up doing them, all the way up until you end up getting into the Geode surface. That quest is really, really good for XP. But once you end up getting beyond that, the delves essentially count as like 3 big dungeons in a row for a single floor. And so you get the most XP out of there. Otherwise, yeah, you pretty much just want to make sure that you're sticking to the adventure world that's got your recommended level. Basically, so long as you can handle it, which is going to vary depending on the class that you're using, you should be in the highest world possible that you can handle. You don't want to go too high up because there's a point where you don't end up getting full XP, but try to find a balance. And for the most part, again, you would just stick to the highest world that you can handle. Oh, and even though the game kind of teaches you Shapestone, I don't know if it teaches you the other ores. Like there's the Formicite is the blue one, Infinium's going to end up being the yellow one. There's basically ore in the various biomes in the game. Some areas it's more common than others. Sometimes you get golden souls like these bad boys right here. All of this is just to explain that there are various ores in the game that might end up being biome specific, and you'll need those for various crafting recipes. Now, the Cornerstone actually does have a couple key features to it that the game doesn't really teach you. Maybe it does now with the new tutorial, but I don't know. First of all, you can actually have multiple Cornerstones. There's a hotkey that you can press to end up bringing this up. You have to buy the other Cornerstone slots, as you can see, but this way you can kind of swap between them, which is really nice. And the Cornerstone is always going to generate whatever you build within this cube. You can even end up destroying like the ground and going deeper underground so that you can have kind of like a little bit more closet space, as you can see right here. There is a text command to disable bombs in your Cornerstone, but I don't know it off the top of my head. Again, refer to the wiki because it explains all the text commands. Another thing that I've got suggested here is switching mounts, because I guess the game never tells you that you essentially are going to start with Slow Sebastian as your starting mount. The mounts are mostly just cosmetic. Some of them actually do have different stats on them, whether it can glide or whether it just has more movement speed. Slow Sebastian is by far one of the slowest mounts in the game, and it is the starting mount in the game, but it can actually be bypassed. You can bypass its movement speed with the Knight subclass ability, which will give you movement speed based on the power rank that you have on your Knight. Just fun little FYI fact. But More importantly, if you want to get off Slow Sebastian as soon as possible, you should check out my videos from a couple years ago in regards to free promo mounts. Now let's talk about gems very briefly, because this could otherwise be its whole own topic. Essentially, when you end up completing dungeons in Prime Worlds, you have a chance of getting this chest, which is a Prime Gem loot box, right? Based on the difficulty world that you're in. While the Prime Worlds have a chance of dropping a box that will give you a random gem element, the Water World, Air World, Lava World, Geode World, those will all give you a box every single dungeon, and it's dedicated to its specific element. So Water World gives you water gems. That can be a way that you end up farming for specific gem types to fill specific gem slots. Because if we go here, you can see I have a mod, so my UI looks a little bit different. But essentially, we have all of these different slots that will slowly unlock as you level up a class. So usually it'll start with the lesser gems, which the lesser gems are gotten out of these boxes. Essentially, now that we have this little fire gem, I could put it on one of these fire gem slots. Granted, I would have to be a high enough level to actually equip it. You can put the gem over top another one and it'll just swap it out, because they actually added this feature a while back now where it's free to switch your gems around, which, yeah, we didn't have that in Old Trove. In Old Trove, you had to spend an item or otherwise destroy the gem. Now, as far as these bigger gems, the empowered gems, that's, it's very time gated, but it is another very big part of the game. Essentially, those delve portals I mentioned are kind of where you'll complete a lot of weekly quests. Oh, right, they're actually over here in the Shadow Tower, and that will end up giving you all of these various items that you can craft, including Titan Souls, which you can craft for Titan's Treasure, Shadow Cache, and more importantly, empowered gem boxes for Lunar Souls, which again, you have to get these out of the delves by completing a certain amount of delves, and you can get a certain amount of the Lunar Souls per week, which will end up giving you the empowered gem box, which has a chance of dropping an empowered gem or a class gem key, or a class gem key fragment, whatever. Class gem keys are basically, you'll go into the Everdark biome right here, and when you complete one of these Colosseums, based on which class you are on, when you use a class gem key, the chest will give you a class gem, which is essentially a gem specifically designed for specific classes. Some of them can end up giving you completely game-changing buffs, like Shadowhunter basically changes its normal shot into a machine gun shot. Now, as far as the best starting class in the game, there's a lot of misinformation for me anyways, just because the starting classes have slowly changed over the years. Like the wiki still says Shadowhunter is a starting class, and I don't know if that's necessarily the case. So what I'm going to assume is that these are the new, like these are the only starting classes in the game as far as I know now. So the wiki's a little wrong, and it's been a few years since I started a new class. But if I had to pick out of all of these, I think it would either be Candy Barb can be a lot of fun early game and quite powerful, but it kind of peters out near the end game. Boomeranger is very powerful, kind of starts out a little bit slow, but eventually becomes one of the strongest in the entire game. Tomb Raiser also starts out very slow, but he's actually one of the tankiest characters in the game. Knight you might want just because he's also quite powerful, but his gameplay is really boring because you basically left click is his strongest attack. So you don't really need to utilize his other abilities. And Gunslinger, you might like ranged, but Gunslinger still kind of sucks. I'm sorry. It's one of the only classes that really like unanimously is not considered good. I won't say it's bad, but it's not considered good. There was a time when Gunslinger was the strongest in the game, and then they brought the other characters up to its power and then some, and it completely got outshined. And then they buffed it a little bit, but not enough to make it worthwhile. Oh, also, when you end up opening up the quest menu, you can see there's event quests, club quests, Trove Agency, whatever. You can at any time just equip these to the top right of your screen. And yeah, it's pretty handy. If you ever want to get rid of them, you just turn always show to off. Oh, and while we've been spending all of this time chilling in the club world, you might want to end up joining someone's club just for the boosts, because there's actually going to end up being these fixtures. I took the wrong portal. Basically, these specific structures in the game are called fixtures, and these will end up providing you with various buffs. So if I go into the menu here and see the fixtures, and I hover over any of these, it'll end up showing grants an experience bonus. This one, that's irrelevant. No, that's also irrelevant. This one grants a chance for an additional gem and reduces the cost to upgrade gems to all members in the club, stuff like that. And this whole mechanic is not something that new players can really easily access, because a club world requires rent in order to manage these and keep these buffs on at all times. So you got to constantly collect this and then deposit it into there, or you can end up completing these adventure quests to get adventurine, so that you could ultimately end up buying some stuff with that adventurine. There's a whole bunch of different mechanics to all the club stuff that can be a little bit daunting. Something that I always loved about Trove that I kind of think people take for granted these days is the fact that you can swap to any class on the fly, and everything that you earn in this game is account bound. So it's not like you're just swapping to the knight and now, oh, oops, that's a mod that makes me invisible. I'm not swapping to the pirate captain and starting from scratch. I'm literally just here on my same character account, which means I could farm for gear for that class on my Shadow Hunter, for example. I'm just saying, I think it's really cool how it's all just account bound. And lastly, let's talk about the overarching game loop, namely how to get strong, because that's kind of the whole point of the game, is to get as strong as possible, and then this little PR power rank thing in the top left. So for early game, you're just going to be grinding up dungeons, getting your character to max level, which is 30. And then from that point on, you'll start getting Paragon levels, which are not the same Paragon levels from Diablo or whatever. It's not like infinite stats or anything. It basically is going to end up giving you various resources that you can use to craft crystal rings. So crystal rings are going to end up being class specific. That will end up giving you various buffs if you shine them with these various items that you get out of your Paragon levels. So essentially when you get to the end game, you just keep grinding infinite levels up to 1,000 before it resets. And then essentially it just gives you resources to end up crafting those rings. That's one aspect of the game. The other main aspect is going to end up being all of the gems, which you'll be able to get higher and higher quality of gems the further on you go in the adventure world difficulty. And eventually, when you get to D14, that's where you can start getting like crystal gems. But in order to get to crystal gems in the first place, you gotta be strong enough, which might require you to get radiant gems leveled up enough that you can get stellar gems, and then level those up enough, and then so on and so forth. The whole game loop is kind of centralized around that. But there is also going to end up being player gear, which gear eventually goes up to the grade of crystal, and then crystal gear goes up in various levels, crystal 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, and then crystal 6 is in the game as mystic gear, which is something that I wouldn't recommend anybody end up actively farming right now. It's very, very unorthodox and it's broken. You basically have to spend 2,000 hours just farming for one piece, not even including upgrades. But ultimately, your goal is to start utilizing the best stats of gems, the best gear on your character, specifically on your class. In which case, so that we don't end up spending way too long on this video, I'll send you guys off to my recent class guides that I just put out. So I've got class guides for every class in the game. That's all 18 classes for 2024. And these are definitive guides that go into detail about how you would end up building each of them. Yeah, anyways, ladies and gentlemen, I think that covers pretty much all of the stuff that a new player would really be daunted by and not know what's going on. Again, if there's anything else that you guys think I was missing, which I'm sure there is, please sound off in the comments. It would be very appreciative. Keep in mind, this video is intended for new players coming to Trove. I know there's not many of you guys, but for those of you that do come to Trove, I'm hoping that in my own small way, this video can end up being helpful. And if it was, I would appreciate if you would like, subscribe, hit the notification bell. You guys know how it all goes. Buy the merch you want to support the channel. Merch is cheaper than it's ever been. Anyways, have yourselves a wonderful day.